I think sometimes I end up with a little bit of dead air right at the beginning, and I'm never entirely sure if the video starts when I start talking or if it's got a few seconds there before we actually get into the conversation. But welcome to the Panther-Lair podcast, the Panther-Lair Show here on YouTube.com, the live stream here on Tuesday nights at 8:30, as we always do. On YouTube.com/Panther-Lair.com, just trying to get settled, get everything organized. Of course, I appreciate everybody who listens to the podcast through the week. I wonder if most of our listenership has shifted over to the live stream. Like I can already see in the live chat, Jeremy Tunney chiming in. This is his first time watching the video, and he's excited to be here for the live stream. I wonder if people have shifted over. I'm going to see what the numbers look like, but you never know what sort of organic growth and that kind of thing. But like I always say, I think our live streams on Tuesday nights are fun to do. I think we have a good time because we have conversation. We don't just it's not just me sitting here talking at you. It is just me sitting here talking at you, but you can get into the conversation. You can ask questions, post comments and suggestions and feedback and just your thoughts on whatever we're talking about. And there's always something to talk about, right? With Pitt sports. We know that from Panther-Lair.com, that website, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. We know there's always something to talk about with Pitt sports because you can go to the message boards at Panther-Lair.com and always find a conversation going on about Pitt sports, whether it's football stuff, it's basketball stuff, it's recruiting stuff. And, this week there's been a little bit of national college football news to discuss. We're certainly going to talk about that here on this week's Panther-Lair Show. Because, look, the reality is if you follow a team in college football, if you are a college football program, a college athletics program, all of this is very, very relevant to you because this is all going to have an impact on your ability to do business. If you're the program, on your ability to do business going forward. And if you are just a fan of the program or someone who follows the program, it's going to impact what you're watching and the product you're seeing. And whether, I think there are a lot of questions about whether it's good or bad for college football. And I think the consensus is it's not good. But I think there are ways this thing could go that don't necessarily have to kill a program like Pitt or send Pitt out to pasture, along with 50 other or 100 other FBS football programs. I think there are ways this can go that it's not going to be the best scenario. It's not going to be ideal for anybody other than the SEC, but it's still a viable option. So we'll talk about that. We got a lot to discuss, as we always do on the Panther-Lair Show. You know the deal. We sit here, we talk. You got comments or questions, you put them in the chat screen there on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com, and people are already jumping in with comments and questions. It's always good to see that happening. And Michael B., our guy, jumping in as a super chatter, which you can be a super chatter, support the podcast, with a little bit of extra support. And Michael B. has done that. He says he doesn't even have any questions tonight. He just wants to support the podcast, and I appreciate that. The thing is, if you are a super chatter and you throw a couple bucks in there, we'll make sure that we get to your comments and questions. I know sometimes we miss people's comments, we miss people's questions. We won't miss it if you're a super chatter. Believe me, you guys make this thing go. So we'll definitely get to what you have to say and what you think. I want to jump into some of the comments and questions here right off the bat. I've got some things I want to talk about, and we're going to get to those. We got an hour here to hang out. But a few comments and questions right off the bat. And S-Mac, one of our regulars, he's always here on the live stream, or she is always here on the live stream. Your first name is S. That could stand for anything, or your name could just be S. Jumps in right off the bat and says, Justin Champagny being drafted would be a huge feather in Jeff Capel's cap. Do any players from the current Pitt Hoops roster have NBA potential? Draft coming up here in a couple days this week. I don't know what the latest is on Justin Champagny. You mentioned Champagny and his chances of being drafted. I haven't looked at any mock drafts lately. I know he seems to have dropped quite a bit in the last 2 months. I can't imagine that he has gone up all that much. I would have to double check and see where he stands. I know your question is about the current roster, but just as it relates to Champagny, I would have to take a look and see kind of where he stands with things. Obviously, anytime you get a player from your program drafted, it's It's a bonus for you. It's a benefit for you. Anytime your program is mentioned in that kind of setting, mentioned on that stage, that's a good thing for you because you're trying to get recognition. You want your program's name, you want the Pitt logo to be out there in front of people. So that would be a positive. And certainly somebody like Justin Champagnie, who maybe didn't come in with the most recruiting hype, you can look, I think what coaches love to do, and I'm sure the Pitt football team did this too. When Patrick Jones and Rashad Weaver are both named All-Americans and they get drafted, I'm sure Pitt was sending out images and graphics and logos to potential defensive end recruits and maybe a lot of, defensive line recruits saying these two guys were 2-star prospects and we just grew them, developed them into All-Americans and draft picks. Now, we all know that the rating system missed the mark, at least on Weaver. I think Jones, you can make a case for why he was a 2-star prospect, even though he had more Power 5 offers than you would expect your standard 2-star to have. But Weaver, it didn't make any sense at all that he would be a 2-star prospect. Nevertheless, you recruit on that kind of stuff. They're like, look, we took these guys who were rated 2 stars, and we made them into All-Americans and draft picks. And I think if you're, Jeff Cable, and you've got Justin Champagnie, you say, this was what his rating was. He was 3-star, low 3-star. Didn't have that many offers. And now look where he's going. Look what he's doing. He averaged a double-double in the ACC. He had 20 games in the ACC, and now he's drafted. Or he's playing in the NBA. He's getting paid money to play basketball. And more than you're going to make on your name, image, likeness. So, that's the kind of thing that obviously is a huge bonus for you. If you have that, there's no downside. I guess we would say that. As for the current roster, it's funny. I saw your question, and I started thinking about it a couple minutes ago. And in a way, your question kind of touches on or dovetails with why I think this season is so interesting for Pitt. Because I don't know. I can look at guys like Femi Odikale, and I can look at Will Jeffress, and I can look at John Hughley. I can look at a few of these guys and say, there's really something there. There's a real potential there. There's a real potential for these guys to be really good. And play at a really high level. But you don't know. You've seen flashes, but not anything that you would bank on. Anything that you would say, oh, that's concrete. This guy's going to be a stud. And so that, to me, is what makes this season so interesting, is because there is a real potential that those guys could take a big step forward. Those three in particular, Odikale, Jefferson, Hughley, coming off of their freshman seasons, which were, atypical, to say the least, each in their own ways, but they all had atypical, freshman seasons just due to, COVID and not having a real offseason. I think you look at those guys and say, now they've had a full year of college basketball. They're going to have a full year of strength and conditioning work. They're going to have a full year of just getting acclimated to being college students. And this is probably something we overlook when we talk about freshmen. And I know I overlook it. And I've tried to bring it up from time to time when we talk about freshmen and we evaluate freshmen and why guys get, why highly rated guys might end up being a bust. Or low-rated guys might surprise, why guys just don't translate well to college. And a part of it is that it's hard to project and it's hard to get an idea of how the college experience is going to treat people. If you think back to your freshman year of college, it's an eye-opening experience. Unless if you stayed in your hometown and, lived at home and just took classes at the local college, that's a different kind of experience. But you go away to school, you're living on your own for the first time in your life, for the most part. It's a whole new experience, a whole new level of responsibility, a whole different type of responsibility than you've probably ever had. You never know how guys are going to adjust to that. And for some, they never really adjust very well. Some adjust great right out of the gate. For most, it takes a little time to get used to, just like it took a little time for you or for me to get used to being in college. And I think we discount that or overlook it when we talk about, student athletes, that we don't pay enough attention or give enough credit to the difficulty of transitioning to college, and not even the difficulty, but the challenge of transitioning to college. It doesn't have to be difficult, but it is a challenge. It is something to overcome. And so you take these guys who, had varying degrees of their roles, they had different types of roles throughout their freshman season, and those things even changed throughout the course of the season. John Hughley obviously had a big transition in the middle of his freshman season. Femi Odekale goes from bench guy behind one of the top minutes eaters in the ACC to a starter by the end of the season. And Will Jeffress is kind of here and there showing flashes. So it's all a transition period for these guys. But now you've got a year of college under your belt. You've got a year of being part of college basketball, being on an ACC basketball program under your belt. And that experience, not just on the court, but in just the whole world of being part of that environment, that experience is invaluable, I think. And I think you can see guys take a big step between their freshman and sophomore years. I think that's a big transition year. That's a big opportunity for a step forward and a giant leap forward, as we always like to say. And so I'm really curious to see what Odekale and Jeffress and Hughley do. In addition to Nike Sabandi having a full year, Ethiel Horton having played in the ACC for a full year. These transfers who are coming in, freshmen coming in. It's a lot of moving parts. Noah Collier, you throw into that conversation as well as we talk about freshmen moving up to sophomores. It's going to be really interesting to see because I don't know what to expect out of most of these guys. If we just go on past experience or what they've shown so far, it's not going to be very good. But if we cherry pick some of the flashes, pick a few of the highlights and say, okay, if they can do that for 25 minutes a night or 30 minutes a night or 35 minutes a night, then those players will be pretty good and this team could be pretty good. So your question about do any of these guys have NBA potential? Sure, I guess, possibly. I don't know. Let's see. Pitt players. Are they NBA players? Do they have NBA potential? What do they know? Let's find out. We'll find out. I don't know about the NBA potential part, but we'll find out if they're any good over the next year. And I'm excited to find out because I think there have been just enough flashes to sort of draw in my interest. Coaster King with the next question says, thoughts on our chances with Jalen Marshall now that he's decommitted from Arizona State. Jalen Marshall is a safety prospect, a high-end three-star prospect from Miami who's committed to Arizona State, took an official visit to Pitt last month, ended up taking an official visit to Georgia Tech a couple weeks later, and it was pretty clear after his Pitt visit that he wasn't 100% solid with Arizona State, that was going to, that commitment was going to be tenuous at best, although he did want to take an official visit with the Sun Devils in the fall, which had the potential to, re-secure that commitment. But I think when he came out of his Pitt official visit, it was clear that he wasn't dead set on Arizona State. So I think the decommitment was sort of a long time coming. Pitt's chances, I don't know. They made a really good impression on him coming out of the gate. There is a scholarship crunch. We could see them, I could see them looking to add another defensive back, which is what, like I say, is what Jalen Marshall is. Will he pick Pitt? I don't know. I'm guessing he'll take his 3 official visits in the fall. Where he will choose to go, I'm not sure. He would be a good gift for Pitt if he chose to pick the Panthers. But, sometimes... sometimes some recruitments play out for a while. And I wouldn't be surprised to see Jalen Marshall still kind of on the fence about things by the time we get to December and signing day, even if he commits to another school or two. I wouldn't be surprised to see him. And that's not a criticism of him. I'm not trying to say he's flaky or something like that. But I could see him bouncing around a little bit before he finally puts his name on the dotted line. But Pitt will be involved. They've got Charlie Partridge working on it. I think Corey Sanders is really good, and he's involved with Jalen Marshall, and so I think they'll get a shot. All right, Coaster King then gets to the real question, the one that I think is something that we all have been talking about and thinking about for the last week. He says, are we going to have yearly backyard brawls again? And that's the real... That's the thing we got to talk about here. Because in the time since last week, since our last podcast, Texas and Oklahoma pretty much have declared that, they've applied to join the SEC, to leave the Big 12 and move on to the SEC. And this is a major move. It's a major power move by the SEC. It's a major power move by Texas and Oklahoma to make this kind of move, to abandon the Big 12, seemingly without any real sort of negotiations of trying to increase the revenue that they were getting in the Big 12, either with an imbalanced revenue, even more than imbalance that already is for Texas, or just trying to get a new TV deal, whatever it is. It doesn't seem like Texas and Oklahoma, it's not like they expired all available options to make the Big 12 work. They're cutting and running, and they're going to the SEC, which the rich get richer, the powerful get more powerful. The SEC is going to get a ridiculous TV contract when they've got Texas and Oklahoma in. It doesn't make any sense with geographics. It doesn't make any sense, or I guess we use the word geography on these fancy podcasts. It doesn't make any sense with geography. It doesn't make any sense with rivalries. It doesn't make any sense with tradition or history or any of those things. And anytime any of these people talk to you about tradition or history, you can slap them in the face and tell them to shut up, because they don't care about those things. They care about money. And I think David Hale from ESPN made this point on Twitter. It was something I was thinking about. I'm going to write about it in the 321 column this Friday on Panther-Lair.com. In any of these conversations about conference realignment, the answer to every question always is money. Money, money, money. That's all it comes down to. And if you try to talk yourself into a scenario that doesn't hinge on money and revenue and getting paid, stop. Don't even waste your time. All these people talking about do this, do that. They can move here, they can move that. Does it make everyone more money? Because if it doesn't, then it's not going to happen. I'll tell you what. We all sit back and look at Notre Dame as being a bunch of pompous you-know-whats. They're condescension and they're so pious. They think they're better than everybody else. They think Notre Dame is special and it's different and it's unique. And to be honest, if you've been to South Bend, you've gone to a game there, it is special. It is different. It is unique. You understand where that condescension comes from. I think it was 2012. I was out there for the Pitt game in 2012. The one where they had 2 number 2s on the field and K'Wan Williams got called for a pass. You know what happened there. I remember being out there for that game, and that was the third time I had been to Notre Dame. I went in 2008, I went to 2010, and I went in 2012. Paul Christ's first year. And I remember sitting in the press box. This is after walking through the parking lots on a beautiful fall day, and it's just, you're in there, and there's all those yellow flowers. Notre Dame fans are spinning in their graves because, that I just refer to them as yellow flowers, because I'm sure there's some specific brand of flower, some specific breed of flower that means something in the long legendary history of Notre Dame, because that's just how these people are. Everything means something to them, and their silly gold helmets and all that. But I'm sitting back there, and I'm taking all this in, and I'm saying, I get it. I think you could probably even find the tweet. I tweeted something about, you understand where the Notre Dame condescension comes from when you're in a place like this. And I remember that tweet distinctly because Sam Warner from the Post-Gazette was sitting next to me. And Sam went to Notre Dame. And he was sitting next to me in the press box. And he's got Twitter open. And I send this tweet about how you can understand where Notre Dame the condescension of Notre Dame fans comes from. And he turned to me and said, do you think I'm condescending? And I'm like, Sam, you're wearing your class ring to cover this game. What do you think the answer is? And I love Sam. Sam's a great guy. I mean, I busted his balls about Notre Dame all the time because I could and I had to. Why wouldn't you? Anyway, Notre Dame, for all of the nonsense that they are, I'll give them a little bit of credit. They're not 100% motivated by money. Ultimately, they do want more money. Ultimately, they're going to try, they're going to build their own streaming service, their own broadcast, their own TV and all this stuff, and they're going to make oodles of cash out of it. And they are motivated by that. But when it comes down to it, they're mostly motivated by their own self-righteousness. And I kind of admire that because at least it's not money. It's at least something other than money that if they were motivated by money, they would have joined a conference by now. I mean, you look at the numbers, they get $15 million a year from NBC. $15 million. It's a fraction of what the other conferences give their schools. I mean, the ACC is, I think, the bottom of the Power 5 conferences in terms of their payouts to individual schools, and it's still double that. Now, they also give Notre Dame some money, so it gets a little closer to the 29 or 30 million that the ACC schools get. But you get my point. If it was really just about money, Notre Dame would have been out of the NBC deal and into the conference a long time ago. But it's not. It's not just about money for Notre Dame. It's about being Notre Dame. having their own television contract, having their gold helmets and their touchdown Jesus and all the other nonsense that goes along with it. That's what's most important to them. And again, it's based on vanity. It's based on pride. It's based on self-righteousness. It's based on thinking you are better than and different from everybody else. And there's a lot to dislike about that mentality, but God, at least it's not just about money. So I give Notre Dame some credit for that. But now that you have these moves, you have Texas and Oklahoma on the move, right? If you're the ACC and you're the schools in the ACC, you start to get a little bit nervous because you know that the only way you can really move the needle is by adding Notre Dame. And you're not going to get Notre Dame. Notre Dame is contractually obligated. If they ever join a conference, they have to join the Big East, or join the Big East. That would be awesome. If they ever join a conference, at least until like 2036, I think it has to be the ACC. So they're contractually obligated to join the ACC, but they're never going to join the ACC. People talk about how the ACC had leverage over Notre Dame last year by providing Notre Dame with a schedule of teams to play, 11 teams to play, or whatever, however, I guess 10 conference games. And so they could have used that leverage to further nudge Notre Dame into a conference. It wasn't going to happen. Notre Dame's not going to join a conference. And so that was a pipe dream, less than a pipe dream. So that's not an option. But what can they do? What is an option for the ACC? And I think the reality is what you need is the ACC and the Pac-12 both to look at this and say, what are our options here? And you know what? The Big Ten too. The Big Ten too, because if the SEC continues its sort of forming like Voltron take over the world mentality, yeah, they're going to try and get Clemson, and they're going to try and get Ohio State, and they're going to try and get Michigan, and maybe that's it. That would put them at what, 19 teams? So maybe they take one more. Florida State. So they sure, they might try and poach some ACC teams, but if they really want to build this super conference, they're going to go after some Big Ten teams too. And so I think it's in the Big Ten's interest to sort of get on board with this plan as well. And to me, what I think the plan is, or should be, or very well could be, because look, anybody who sits back and tells you what's going to happen, this is what's going to happen, this is what's going to happen. You hear people say this all the time. Here's what's going to happen. This and this and this and this. You don't know. Because if I asked you a week and a half ago, hey, are Texas and Oklahoma going to go to the SEC? You say, no, are you kidding me? Are you stupid? Texas will go independent before they go to the SEC, right? Here's what I think could happen, potentially should happen. I haven't thought through all the ramifications of it, but it could happen. That the ACC, the Big Ten, and the Pac-12 get together and say, listen, we can't stop this monster over here. The best we can do to keep the SEC from completely taking over the sport is to hold on to ours. To not let Clemson go, not let Florida State go, not let Ohio State go, not let Michigan go, not let USC go, or Oregon go, right? And so what we do is we look at college football, and we don't talk about Cincinnati, UCF, Navy. We look at the Big 12. Because Big 12, guess what, man? You're left for dead. Okay? And I say this as someone who observed the Big East for years. This is not condescension about the Big 12 or anything like that, because the ACC is obviously in a tenuous position right now with everything that's gone on. But I think if you're the ACC, the Big 10, and the Pac-12, you look at the Big 12 and say, guys, come on. Face the reality. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 teams. There's 8 teams left with Texas and Oklahoma gone. You guys aren't going to survive. You can go out and get 6 group of 5 teams. You can go get Cincinnati and Memphis and UCF and Navy, or whoever else you think you can get, or whoever else you think you want, but you're not going to make it. You're not going to get the money that you need to be competitive. And then the first chance any of you gets, you're gone. So let's just carve this thing up. Let's spread you out, and let's do 4 16-team super conferences. And maybe If we all bulk up to 16, we can convince the SEC that there's 4 of us now with 16 teams each. The SEC, once they add Texas and Oklahoma, they're going to be at 16. We'll each get to 16. Plus, we've got Notre Dame hanging out there, and we'll reform this alliance as we want it to be, and kind of as you want it to be, SEC. Just don't take any more of our teams. That might be the best way for these conferences to hold on and hold together. Now, how would I break them up? This was actually kind of like a fun exercise as I was thinking about it, of how you would take these other 8 teams: TCU, Baylor, Texas Tech, Oklahoma State, Iowa State, West Virginia, Kansas State. How would you take those 8 teams and split them up among the ACC, the Big Ten, and the Pac-12? Here's what I would do. I would take the 3 Texas teams. I would take TCU, Baylor, and Texas Tech, and I would dump them in the Pac-12. And I'd give them Oklahoma State as well. And, keep the 3 Texas teams together, add in Oklahoma State. I don't know what kind of rivalries exist between Oklahoma State and those 3 Texas teams, but at least they'll all be kind of close to each other so they can play, save on travel costs, that at least each of those teams will have 3 opponents they play every year that are relatively close, right? I think Iowa State is kind of an obvious one that you put into the Big Ten. Iowa's already there. It might not help expand your cable markets, but it's going to grow, and you've got strong fan base. I think West Virginia makes sense geographically with the ACC. I know I said before that I don't care about anybody who talks about geographics. It's stupid, but if we're going to carve up the Big 12 and split it up among these other 3 conferences, I think West Virginia makes the most sense in the ACC. And that leaves Kansas and Kansas State. And in this scenario, the Pac-12 will be at 16 schools. They've got their 12 plus the 3 Texas schools in Oklahoma State. And then the ACC and the Big 10 will need 1 each, which means Kansas State, sorry guys, you're getting split up. That sucks. I hate it for you. I hate to have 2 in-state schools split up. Let me tell you from experience, when there are 2 Power 5 schools in the same state, it sucks that they don't play in the same conference. I am well aware of this, and it seems stupid, but look at the sport that we're talking about right here. It's a wash in stupidity at this point. Not stupidity, it's a wash in cash. So Kansas and Kansas State, you got to get split up. I don't know which way you do it. Put Kansas in the ACC. Put Kansas in the Big Ten. I mean, what's even the more attractive athletic program right now? Kansas football is a disaster and should be, it should be collapsed. But Kansas basketball obviously is a huge brand and a huge attraction. It is one of the blue bloods in college basketball. We know that because they wear blue uniforms. We've had that conversations before. Kansas State, I don't know. Take your pick. And you know what? If you need to get if you're having difficulty getting the Big Ten on board with this, let them choose. You want Kansas, you Kansas State. You guys pick. You get them. All right. It doesn't make sense geographically. None of it does. And none of it's going to. Texas is in the freaking Southeastern Conference now. And that's the other thing we're going to do. We're going to rename these conferences. SEC, Southeastern Conference, no. You're the Southern Conference. All right? Actually, SEC, to get you to go along with this, if you want to keep Southeastern in your name, keep Southeastern in your name. I don't really give a... call yourself whatever you want to call yourself. You're probably going to end up being sponsored by somebody, right? The Sony SEC or something like that. But you want to call yourself Southeastern, you want to call yourself Southern, whatever. I think the Big Ten you would rename as the Northern Conference. I think what you'd do is you'd kind of look at like the NFL divisions. You wouldn't have an East because there's nowhere that you could really identify as East, but you could have a South, a Central, a Northern, and a Western. Central being, basically the ACC plus West Virginia and Kansas or Kansas State, whichever. Your Northern would be the Big Ten plus Iowa State and either Kansas or Kansas State. Your Western Conference would be the Pac-12 plus the 3 Texas schools in Oklahoma State. And then, ACC, you want to call it Central Conference, you want to call it the Coastal Conference, whatever. And then, SEC would be your Southern Conference, which, none of these things make any sense, but none of this does. But it's all about the money. And I think the money here becomes relevant because you look at it on one hand, you say, all right, outside of the Pac-12 adding Texas, markets in Dallas, Fort Worth, Waco, and Lubbock, you're not expanding into giant markets too much. West Virginia and either Kansas or Kansas State don't really add much at all in terms of markets to the ACC. Iowa State and Kansas State don't add much to the Big Ten in terms of markets either. But growing the numbers should allow you to go back to the negotiating table. That's the case with the ACC, where the ACC can't really renegotiate this contract they've got with ESPN, save for a few triggers from what we've all read over the last week, right? And one of those is adding new teams. So maybe if you can add West Virginia and Kansas, or West Virginia and Kansas State, that takes you back to the negotiating table. And you could say, and I think, so you would look at it and say, okay, how much more money are you going to get with West Virginia and Kansas? So that's true. However, making these moves puts us in cahoots with the SEC, puts us in this alliance with the SEC. The move toward Power 5 autonomy has been going on for years now. Maybe this fully solidifies it as a separate entity of these 64 schools plus Notre Dame, because you can't go anywhere without Notre Dame. Maybe this sort of solidifies it as an autonomous entity. And by virtue of being part of that autonomous entity, the ACC is able to get more money. The Pac-12 is able to get more money. The Big Ten is already getting oodles of cash, and maybe they can get more money out of it as well. I don't know. This might be the best way to keep some semblance of the ACC together. This might be the best way to make sure that, Ohio State doesn't get lured away or Michigan doesn't get lured away. Best way to make sure that Clemson doesn't get lured away and Florida State doesn't get lured away. That they can, and honestly, I don't care about these conference allegiances. It'd be weird to not have Ohio State in the Big Ten anymore, but I got over it with Nebraska in the Big 12. What I care about and what's interesting to me or relevant to me is what happens to Pitt. And if you start having these schools get poached, if Clemson gets poached, if Florida State gets poached, now the ACC is very much in jeopardy. And if the ACC is in jeopardy as a premier top-end conference, a power conference, then Pitt is in jeopardy as a power program. And that's not just Pitt. That's Boston College. That's, read down the list. It's everybody other than Clemson and Duke. Yes, even you, Miami. You'll be in trouble here because I don't know if they're going to ask you to join. They might, but they might not need you. If they could get Clemson and Florida State, and maybe, if the SEC could pull off Ohio State and Michigan, they don't need you, Miami. Your green and orange is going to be stuck with everybody else. So, it's everybody in the ACC is in jeopardy if Clemson gets poached or Florida State gets poached or both of them do. And so you're looking for solutions to keep the conference together, to make sure that the conference exists, not because you give a damn about the history of the ACC, because I don't, but because you want Pitt to have a safe place to live, which is what the ACC provides for Pitt right now. No, I don't know. I don't know if this would actually ever happen. It wouldn't surprise me if we move toward these 16-team super conferences. And the best way to do that is to carve up the Big 12. And I'm sorry, Big 12. And it's no disrespect to you, but each of those 8 programs has to realize that right now. Their future moving into the ACC or the Big 10 or the Pac-12 is better than their future adding Cincinnati and Memphis and Middle Tennessee and UCF and Navy and whoever else. That's just the reality of the situation. You have a better future getting into one of these super conferences than you do holding on to the tradition of the Big 12 playing against Cincinnati and UCF. But I don't know. There's a lot more to it that I am not privy to, obviously, and a lot more to it that I'm not even smart enough to really comprehend. That's one idiot Jagoff's thoughts on college football and college sports conference realignment here on Tuesday, July 27th. All right, let's see if we got some comments here, see if anybody's got anything to say about this particular topic. Let's scroll down here, see what people, everybody's chiming in. Jeremy Tunney says it's you listen to the podcast every week. It's my favorite podcast out there. Appreciate that, man. Thank you, Jeremy. Kevin Plaucha checking in. Good to see Kevin. He's one of our biggest fans on Twitter. I appreciate that. Good to hear from you. Let's see here. A lot of questions about things. Let's see if we got anything just left over from this conversation about conference alignment. RJ Seaman38, one of our super chatters, he's chimed in, and we appreciate him. He says, West Virginia will never get in the ACC. It's not a member of the AAU. Yeah, that's the Association of American Universities, American Association of Universities. It's a research university designation. Pitt's a member, and that helped its membership in the ACC happen. But I think there's only like 6 or 7 schools in the ACC right now that are members of the AAU. So, like the academics thing stopped being relevant when they let Louisville in. I mean, that's the truth. And and that's what it comes down to. None of these things that have defined these conferences for so long, none of them matter anymore. There's just money. This is the only thing that matters. Talking about Notre Dame, RJ Seaman follows up and says Notre Dame's a Northeastern institution despite its Indiana address. I don't know, man. Notre Dame is Midwest. Driving out there a couple years ago when Pitt played out there in 2018, I mean, there was a distinctly different feel as I drove through Ohio and into Indiana and spent time in Indiana and went to the game and everything. There was a distinctly different feel to that than there is when I drive down through West Virginia, through Beckley, and into Winston-Salem or into Durham or into Charlotte or Raleigh or Chapel Hill or wherever it is. It's very, very different. Culturally, it's very different. And I said this after the Notre Dame game in 2018. And I felt it a little bit about the Penn State game in 2017 and the one in 2019. Like culturally, as someone who lives in Pittsburgh and then goes to these different places, I go to Durham, I go to Atlanta, I go to Charlotte, I go to Chapel Hill, I go down into Florida, I go to Blacksburg, I go to Charlottesville. Going to State College and going to South Bend, and a few years ago going out to Iowa when Pitt played at Iowa. Culturally, Pitt as an institution, as a city, it fits more in the Big Ten than it does in the ACC. It just felt like, I don't know a good way to put it, because it's not like I go to a game in Chapel Hill and it's all yokels walking around, and they got all their southern accents and I don't fit in or anything like that. It just felt like we were around people that reminded me of home when I was in South Bend or when State College is only 2 hours away. So of course it felt like you were close to home because you actually are close to home, as opposed to when you go to Charlottesville or you go to Blacksburg. And I like those places. I like Charlottesville a lot. I like being in the Triangle. I've had a lot of good times in Charlotte. I had a lot of fun in Durham and Chapel Hill. Love going to Atlanta. It's one of my favorite places to visit. I think it's a great city. But it felt like a departure culturally from where I was, when I left to drive down there, as opposed to driving out to South Bend or driving up to State College. I mean, I think one fits a lot better than the other. One feels more sort of natural. I was mentioning the yellow flowers they have at Notre Dame. Coaster King says, aren't the flowers 4-leaf clovers? I mean, if 4-leaf clovers bloom a yellow flower, yes, I guess, but I don't think they do. I could be wrong, though. Let's see here. Coaster King says, send both of the Kansas teams to the Pac-12 and put Oklahoma State in the ACC. That's the only, the only thing about that is I think you put Oklahoma State with the Texas team so they all kind of have somebody close to each other, especially in the Pac-12 where you're going to be isolated from the bulk of the rest of the conference in Texas and Oklahoma. So, I mean, you put them together. I mean, if you put Oklahoma State in the ACC, they're off by themselves. You know what I mean? You've got a whole swath of them here, and then you've got Oklahoma State way over there. And it's still going to kind of be that case with Kansas, but at least it's a little bit closer than Oklahoma State. But, I mean, we could haggle over that. Give Oklahoma State a friend, other than West Virginia. But we could haggle over where to put those teams. But I do think carving up the Big 12 is probably the way to go. Let's see. TRR says Cincinnati, West Virginia, Pitt, Boston College, Syracuse, Virginia Tech, Virginia, Georgia Tech would make a fine North Division if the ACC went to 16. I would say yes, but not Cincinnati. I don't know what team you put in there. West Virginia, Pitt, Boston College, Syracuse, Virginia Tech, Virginia, Georgia Tech. That's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. You need one more. Louisville. You put Louisville in the North. Louisville will be your. I mean, if you're going to take Cincinnati and count them as part of the North, you can put Louisville in the North. And then your South will be Clemson, Duke, Florida State, Georgia Tech, Miami, Carolina, NC State, Wake Forest, and Kansas. Kansas in the South. Yeah, have fun. I don't think these power conferences, I don't think the move is to bring in a team like Cincinnati. I don't think you best position yourself. And I know Cincinnati is a TV market and this kind of thing. They've had success lately. I just don't. I don't think that's what. I don't think that's the best move for the ACC or the Big 12. I mean, I think if the Big 12 does that, they just slip further behind. I don't think the Big 12 has a way to save itself, to be honest. I think they're beyond saving. You lose Texas and Oklahoma, it drops you down to 8 teams. I think you fade into oblivion pretty quickly, and I think that's why these teams will be looking to go. And I think if they're going to look to go, I think the rest of these conferences should look to carve them up and take what they can get, That's my thought. Let's see. Let's jump off some other topics here. Jeremy Tunney says, with Paris Ford and DeMar Hamlin moving on, who are you most excited about in the secondary? I mean, I'm most excited about Khalil Anderson in the secondary. He's sort of my go-to guy as a freshman coming in, but he's playing cornerback, so I don't think that would really count. Safety-wise, I think MJ Devonshire is really interesting. I think he looked pretty good in the spring game, and I think he's going to get a lot of time out there. I've liked Brandon Hill since he was a recruit coming in. You remember he made his first start after Paris Ford left the team. Brandon Hill made his first start down in Florida State and missed a tackle on the first play and gave up a long run to the quarterback. But then he had an interception. Did he end up with a pick six? Did he go back for a touchdown or just return a pick? Anyway, I mean, he ended up playing pretty well. I thought he was one of the, I don't know about steals, but I thought he was one of the really good recruits in the 2019 class. And I still have pretty high hopes for him. So I think he's going to be good. I think Eric Hallett has been a really solid player in his time at Pitt. I think P.J. O'Brien's got a chance to be pretty good. I think he'll be playing safety. He could do either one, safety or corner. I think they've got some good options back there. I think they've recruited the secondary really well. The thing they're missing is just experience. Even MJ Devonshire coming in from Kentucky didn't have that much playing time. I mean, Hallett and Hill have played, but not that much. Certainly not as much as Hamlin and even as much as Paris Ford, who came into last season with a full year of starting experience under his belt. So, I think there are good players back there. It's just going to take a little bit of time It's just going to take a little bit of time is what it's going to come down to. Let's see here. Brock McDonough asking a basketball recruiting question. Where do you think Pitt stands with Dom Barlow and Alfonso Billups? Good chances they land both. We'll see with Barlow. I think they got a real chance with Billups. I think Billups will probably at some point announce a top group, and I think Pitt will make whatever cut they need to make to stay involved with him. I think they'll probably get both of those guys on campus for official visits at some point this fall. But they're battling with him. They're battling for him. And, you're off to a good start with Judah Mintz in this class. And I think, get a wing and a post. And, I think you like what you have there in recruiting class, depending on how you get. I think Billups could fill that wing spot pretty well. And I think they're in good shape with him. It's going to be a battle, though. He's got a lot of good options. TRR says, who's the next quarterback from Western PA who looks to be a Power 5 prospect? Is it Brad Birch? It could be. Brad Birch has that offer from Oregon that he got as a freshman at Jeanette last year. And it's an interesting offer. And Birch has since transferred to Gateway. I've seen him at 2 camps. I saw him at 2 camps this summer. I saw him at Pitt's prospect camp and then another camp earlier this month, the 210ths camp out at 210ths Speed and Agility camp at Shadyside Academy. And he was better at the second camp than he was at the first. I think he's still, he looks young. He looks like he's got some development and some growth that he needs to do. That Oregon offer is weird because, it drew a lot of attention and put his name out there a lot. But it's weird that he hasn't gotten any more offers since then. Like I said, he went to the Pitt prospect camp where, I mean, obviously the Pitt coaches were there, but there were coaches from all over the place. There were coaches at all levels, FCS, D2, and FBS. And he didn't get any offers out of that camp. Now, I wasn't blown away by him at that camp. Maybe he didn't have a great day, but I think he also went to a camp at Youngstown State. Didn't come away with an offer there, which, raises my eyebrow a little bit. You got an Oregon offer, but you didn't get one from Youngstown State. I don't know. And maybe there's more to the story that I'm not aware of, but I mean, just looking at it, that's the one offer so far. You wouldn't typically have a freshman in Western PA get an offer from Oregon before he has any offers from anywhere else, and not have that Oregon offer followed up by any offers from anywhere else. So I don't really know what to make of that. He's probably the main guy to watch. There's just not a lot. Julian Duggar is a guy in that same class at Penn Hills. He's a big athletic guy. He can run around a little bit. He's a lefty, so I mean, you got to get over that. But Pitt has had plenty of good left-handed quarterbacks. They've had two. He looks like a really good prospect. I'm interested to see where his recruitment goes after his sophomore season. But it's just not strong. I mean, Western PA just doesn't turn out the quarterbacks anymore, and for whatever reason. And there's probably a lot of reasons, but for whatever it is, there's just not a lot of guys coming out. Let's see here. Video Resource Library says Lucas Krull is being talked up a lot. He didn't start that hot last year before the injury. If I remember, he had several drops. Do you think he will live up to the hype? So Lucas Krull sat out the Austin Peay game due to injury. Played against Syracuse. I think he had 5 targets, 1 catch for a first down. Look, we got him on the screen over. We just had him on the screen right as I was talking about him. That's perfect synergy. I didn't control that. I couldn't even figure out where to point it out because my video is backward as I look at it. Lucas Krull, yeah, he sat out the Austin Peay game. He had 1 catch, I think, for a first down, 5 or 6 yards. Yeah, he had a drop or 2 in that game. I don't think he was 100% healthy, and he got hurt in that game and missed the rest of the season. But, the spring game, and spring games are what they are. We're not going to make too much out of it, but he looked pretty impressive in the spring game. And he looked impressive doing the kinds of things that you think should be able to translate, like how he was running and how he caught the ball. And he looked good. So, yeah, he's been getting talked up a lot. There's a lot of hype about him. And, and we heard that hype last summer, too, about how good he was, how well he could run, how big he was, how soft his hands were. He was going to be a really big part of the offense. And it obviously didn't happen. I'm willing to chalk that up to injury, but he's going to have to be the man this year. He's going to have to be really good to live up to that hype because the hype is considerable. And the pressure is considerable, the expectations and the importance of his role. That's all very considerable. So, is he going to live up to the hype? I don't know. It's hard for me to predict that. I think he's got the physical tools to be a really good tight end for Pitt. I think he's got the physical tools to make an impact and potentially have a serious effect on Pitt's offense, a positive effect on Pitt's offense. But, we'll find out. Right, we'll find out. Let's see here. Comments and questions. Gun to your head, is Pat Narduzzi the coach at Pitt in 2 years? Yeah, I think he is because I think he has a good year this year and a decent year next year. So I think he sticks around until 2023. Yeah, I'd say he's Pitt's head coach in 2023. What else we got? Questions here. Royce Beacom, don't you think name, image, likeness will become an even bigger effect than it is right now on the polarization of the super conferences? Where do you go to get close to $1 million without even starting the first time? What I've said about name, image, likeness since it first came into effect 4 weeks ago is how it looked on July 1st, 2021, how it looks right now on July 27th, 2021, how it's going to look on January 1st, 2022, how it's going to look on July 1st, 2022. They're all very different things. It's going to change, and it's going to shift, and it's going to adjust over time. I don't know if the Alabama quarterback is going to get $1 million worth of endorsements before he even makes a start. Every year. It may settle into that routine. I don't know. I can't sit here and say that the way this last month has gone with name, image, likeness endorsements is exactly how it's going to go from here on out. I think everybody's trying to figure out what it's going to be and what it's going to look like and how it's going to work and what the market really is going to be. I mean, this is a brand new, untested market. And no matter how many Darren Rovell tweets there are about, this guy's value or that guy's value, we don't know. We don't know what the value is actually going to be. I mean, do you remember the late 1990s, the early 2000s with the dot-com bust, right? The dot-com bubble, and people were paying insane amounts of money, but they didn't even know what they were getting for that money, and they didn't know the value of what they were getting for that money and if the money made sense. Now, this is unique because you have an opportunity here for insane, crazy college football fans to spend insane, crazy amounts of money on their favorite teams and their favorite players. Ultimately in the service of making their teams better, because if you throw all this kind of money around, you're going to draw in more recruits and all that kind of stuff, get the better players. At some point in a few years, people are going to be able to look and say, was this deal worth the amount of money that was paid for it? Did you get the return on the investment? And if they find out that they didn't, that money's going to go down. It's not going to go away, but it's going to go down. And that, we haven't come to that point yet. Now, the big money's always going to be at the bigger schools. The more successful schools, the more prominent players. There's no question about that. But how big it is, I think is very much up in the air and very much up for debate. Or not even up for debate, I shouldn't say. It's very much up for, it's subject to change. It could be different. And it will be different. And it'll grow and adapt and develop over time. And maybe it'll get bigger. Maybe people will spend even more money. I don't think that's going to be the case, but I don't really know. This market is brand new. And it hasn't even come close to establishing itself yet. Bart Simpson says, Brock Madonna question before Bart Simpson says, Brock says, what do you think of Todd Sibley heading into this season? That's my guy, just like Khalil Anderson is your guy. Sibley, for whatever reason, has never caught on. And I don't really have any reason to believe that he's going to catch on as a senior. He has had those moments where you say, wow, it looks like he can really make a play. He really keeps his legs moving. He's got some speed. He can do this. He can do that. But he's never caught on for whatever reason. He seems like a great kid. Seems like a hard worker. Seems like he's made some plays over the course of the last 3 years. But he's never caught on. And coaches have never been sold on him. And so I don't see him being in the top 3 of carries this season, maybe outside the top 4. I think Izzy Abanikanda is going to be your guy. I think Vincent Davis is going to be your guy. I think AJ Davis is going to be your guy. And then you're down to Sibley and Daniel Carter. It's just kind of what it looks like. I mean, you read the writing on the wall for the last 4 years. It's hard to expect year 5 to be anything different. Let's see. Bart Simpson says, I don't understand why people want Cincinnati. Horrible facilities, not that great a team. I go for UCF, West Virginia, or Texas Tech, which is a reach. I still think, UCF is interesting, but I don't know if Miami and Florida State want another team from Florida in the ACC. I'm of the mind that you go with current Power 5 teams that are established in that Power 5 structure, and teams that are established as, like I say, established programs. Just teams that are established. And UCF, for all the successes that they've had, is not established. They're still fighting that stigma of being a Group of 5 team, not being in the Power 5. So, I think if you're going to expand the ACC, you're going to expand the Pac-12, I think you need to carve up the Big 12. You need to cannibalize that league. And and I think you're not going to take all 8 teams and split them up between the ACC and the Pac-12. I think you need to get the Big 10 involved. Kind of ship them all off to new locales and hope that you can get more money. because that's what it's all about, right? Jeremy Tunney says, can you comment on the new sheets in Oakland? Truly historic moment. I've never seen anything like that. We'll finish on this, but did you see this on, I don't even remember what day it was, Saturday, Friday, it doesn't matter. So there was always that shady Exxon, the corner of Forbes and McKee, right? And apparently it's been closed because it got robbed so much, and it was just it was a magnet for trouble, after like 9 o'clock on any night. And so it's been closed, and they got it fenced off, and they're going to do something with it. And somebody took a sign, hung it on the fence. It said "Coming soon, Sheets in Oakland," or "Coming soon, Sheets," or something like that. It made it look like Sheets was going to open in that space. It's got people very excited for the whole weekend. He's very excited for the whole weekend. And then Sheets makes a statement that, no, we have no intentions of putting a Sheets in Oakland. We're not putting a Sheets in Oakland. That's not real. And, there's going to be like an apartment building there or something like that. So somebody went to the trouble of printing out this sign with a Sheets logo on it, laminating it. And this is the thing that's really got people hung up, is that the sign was laminated. And if you can't trust lamination, I mean, what can we believe in? If you can't trust a laminated paper to be official, what can we believe in? So it was laminated, and they used zip ties to hang it to the fence. Somebody went to all this trouble just to screw with people who think Sheets in Oakland would be a great idea. Sheets in Oakland would be a disaster. Because, like, you do really want people to have another place to gather at 3 a.m. on a Friday night or a Saturday night? Do you remember what the O was like? I mean, how many arrests were made at the O? How many shootings happened at the O? How many beatings happened at the O? And you want to give another place, a place with MTOs, where you're just going to stand around waiting for your MTO? Man, Sheets, for me personally, has taken a big step down in recent years. It's not as appealing as it used to be, but I would have loved it in college. And it never, ever should have happened in Oakland. That's a good place to end. Thank you, Jeremy, for bringing that up. Listen, if you're watching the live stream, we appreciate it. There's a bunch of likes coming in. We really appreciate that. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. If you're not listening to the live stream, watching the live stream, and listening to the podcast later, go on and do me a solid. All right. It's going to pay off for you. All right. Trust me. We're going to do some cool things with this YouTube channel in the future. So youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Go subscribe to the YouTube channel. We would really highly appreciate that. So go do that whenever you can. youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Of course, the website Panther-Lair.com, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. It's the most comprehensive source of Pittsburgh's news on the internet. Football, basketball, recruiting. You can find everything you want. Panther-Lair.com. Of course, message boards where these kind of conversations we have right here on the live stream and on the podcast. You can go have those conversations all day, every day on the Panther-Lair.com message board. So make sure you check that out. Saturday mornings, 8 a.m. on 93.7 The Fan. We have the Panthers Insider Show. It's another hour of Pitt sports talk right there on the radio. We'll see all the things that have changed with conference realignment between now and Saturday. It's only a few days away. The whole world could be upside down. USC could be moving to Russia. Who knows? Anything's possible. So tune in for that. We'll break down all the latest news with Pitt and conference realignment and everything going on there. 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. Panthers Insider Show on Sports Radio 93.7 The Fan. And I think that's about it. Just stay tuned to the website, Panther-Lair.com. Thanks everybody on the live stream tonight. We had a lot of fun, good conversation, as we always do. And thanks everybody who listens to the podcast. You guys have a great rest of the night. Have a great rest of the week. We'll talk to you next Tuesday night. Actually, next week's podcast, I'll say this real quick before we get out. We have to move it to Wednesday night. We're going to do the podcast on Wednesday night, August 4th. Not on our live stream won't be on Tuesday night. It'll be on Wednesday night. So, yeah, I think that's the date. So, yeah, do that. Don't tune. I'll tweet about it and stuff like that. But don't tune in on Tuesday night at 8:30. Tune in on Wednesday night at 8:30 for next week's Panther-Lair Show live stream. All right. Thanks again. We appreciate it. I'll talk to you. I'll remind you of the schedule change and all that stuff. But have a great rest of the week. Have a great weekend next weekend, and we will talk to you next week.